So that's something I ask you to think about.
What are you seriously doing about drivers texting?
Yeah, drivers texting is a dangerous thing. And again, people shouldn't be doing that. And believe me, it's a personal thing. I've got a 15-year-old working on her license. So that's a major challenge. So we do need to think about how to make sure we're doing the right thing. And again, you have to respect personal freedom, but you also have to understand safety in terms of both for that driver, but other people on the road. So that is something we need to address and be thoughtful about. Somebody's getting a phone call now, too, I hear.
Governor, what are your plans for renewable energy, meaning solar and wind, for this state and for this area?
Yeah, solar and wind, I'm going to do a message on energy and the environment, a special message in the fall, because it's a very important topic. And the good part is, in this geography, there's actually some reasonably good wind opportunities that are being developed, that exist. We can continue to develop some of those. To put it in some context for you, though, Michigan is not necessarily a very good renewable state for wind or solar relative to states out west and other parts of our country. So one of the things we need to be smart about is making sure we're just not going to raise our cost structures dramatically, because it's not free. I mean, it has to be repaid, and it gets repaid through rates. So one of the questions to look at is to say, where are the right few places in Michigan where it can really work well? And then the other question is, are there other things we should be looking at more on a national policy level, or partnering with other states to say they could produce the power, we could help sell them the turbines, and then we can transmit the power back to Michigan and have a better answer there, along with the power that does work in Michigan. But Michigan's a more challenging state, and you're going to have people arguing for a big percentage increase in that over the next few years. That's not a good idea to simply go do that, because it'll come out of your pocket.
Do you have a long-range plan to make up the deficit in the state pension plans?
Absolutely. I'm glad to be looking at some legislators when I get that question, too. We're having a good dialogue, very healthy dialogue in the legislature right now about reforming the Michigan public employee system. We dealt with the Michigan state employee system last year. And one of the things is, when I was talking about looking at 2030, 2040, 2050, is how do we strike the right balance? Because we do want good plans, we do want good retirements and opportunity for people working in state government or our public employees. So it's not to take away from anything that's already been earned, but looking prospectively ahead, how can we have a better system that's more in line with the private sector to say, here's a way for people to have a good retirement, but at the same time to be more financially responsible as a government? Because we're not doing the best job there. If you look at it, we literally have about $45 billion in liabilities through the public employee system that we're responsible for. Some of the reforms could bring that down to the range of 30 or so. The state system, we were able to reduce our long-term liabilities by about $5 billion, from 15 to 10 or so. So that is something that you have to put up with me. I'm an old CPA. I'm the only CPA governor in the country. So I'm all by myself on that one. But I do like to look at balance sheets and think about long-term responsibility, because too often government was about cash in and cash out, and nobody thought about the credit card bill or the mortgage we were racking up in state government. And God knows, if you look at us, look at Washington. So in many respects, I view us as the role model for Washington. As we address these issues, we're showing the rest of the country that we're among the most responsible. And I think you're going to see that show up in terms of recognition across the country that Michigan has its act together because of the great work getting the budget done 2 years in a row and the quality of those budgets.
Governor, are you in favor of getting rid of handgun registry?
Yeah, what I'd say on handgun registry, I think it's important to have some sort of registration. Again, there's federal laws on this topic. I don't spend a lot of time on handguns. I spend time on jobs and kids. And I appreciate, through your legislators, they bring up those issues. I respect that. That's part of the democratic process. But I spend most all my time saying, how do I worry about more and better jobs and a future for our kids? With respect to other issues, I just view that as part of the normal dialogue, that if you, through your other elected officials, want to bring those up, it's a good, thoughtful dialogue we should have.
Will the Michigan Merit Scholarship Program be reinstated?
I talked about that a little bit earlier. What I would like to see, and again, we have to wait until we can be financially responsible and it can be a program that can last, not just a blip. Because we had, after the merit scholarship, we had the Michigan Promise, which in some ways turned out to be the Michigan Lie in terms of it being taken away from people. And that's not right. I do believe over the longer term we should look at more financial aid models, not just for college, but for trade schools and other opportunities too, because we want to encourage people to be career ready. But what I would say is I would start on a need-based program before you look at it across the board. And why do I say that? Is, to be open with you, I had kids that got some of those earlier programs, and we're very fortunate where we could afford school. And we literally gave the money back to the schools and such so that money could go to scholarships for people that couldn't afford it, so they'd have more resources. So I think it's important we look at it, but let's start with people who have the greatest need, and not just for college, but for career opportunities.
What is with all the legislation that is anti-union, anti-education? How is this impacting the state as a whole?
Yeah, I actually don't view it as anti-union legislation, because again, sometimes people try to put a broad brush. This is just more about the reinvention of Michigan. This is about us working together to understand the world has changed. And if you look at the public sector versus the private sector, we're here to serve you. Again, you're our customer. And I'll use that as an illustration to bring up this point about who creates jobs. The role of government is not to create jobs. The role of government is to enable job creation to happen, for free enterprise to work. Because think about this. A number of us work for state government, but God knows, wouldn't you be nervous if all 10 million of us worked for the state of Michigan? And as a practical matter, we've had a lot of challenges in the structures. If you look at where the private sector's gone, they've reinvented themselves. The public sector, in many respects, had challenging things that financially were unsustainable if we're to provide great service to our customers at a price that makes sense to you. We need to be sensitive, though, because we have good, hard-working people in the public sector. And so how do we have people have the opportunity to continue what they have, but as we have new people join and new opportunities come along, how do we redo that system for the future so we have a better system that's sustainable, that can last for the long term, while still doing the right thing in terms of health care for people and other opportunities?
Why does Lansing stop us from having a casino in Port Huron? We lose a lot of money going across the river and to Detroit, which has no benefit for us.
Yeah, well, the casino issue is one that you're going to see on the ballot again. There could be one or two proposals on casinos, and I understand there is some desire to have one here. But let me ask you the question. Why would just Port Huron get a casino if all of a sudden we decided we're going to open up a lot of casinos? If you change the rules so everyone can do a casino, everyone would do a casino. So between here, you can start going all the way down to say, well, you're going to end up with a casino in St. Clair, you're going to end up with a casino in Grosse Pointe, you're going to end up with a casino on most every place. And then nobody wins. And we actually end up in a lot more social service questions. Because I'm not, to be open with you, I'm not a big fan of casinos. I think there is a recreational element. But there's a pretty good human cost that gets paid too, in terms of, I do look at the stats to say around these areas, are there a lot more calls for public safety, for the sheriff, for the state police, that they have to make domestic violence calls? What's going on with the welfare system in those areas? So it's something that we need to be really thoughtful with. So I don't view it as simply just changing the rules, because you can't just sort of pick this place and that place versus saying what's right for the entire state. And at this time, I think we need to be very careful and thoughtful about what we do before we just open that door. Because I don't think we'd be happy if the door went wide open.
Please comment on the right to work law. What are the possibilities this law will be in Michigan?
Yeah, well, right to work, I've said from day one, is not on my agenda, because I think it's a divisive issue. And look at Wisconsin, look at Ohio. And a lot of people, again, we had a big recall election. I was glad to see Governor Walker stay in office. But what I would also say to you, though, is think about what's going to happen in Wisconsin and Ohio over the next 2 or 3 years about people working together to solve problems. It's going to be very difficult for them to do that because they have a very polarized environment. Now look at Michigan. We've been getting a whole lot done, haven't we? because we focused on things that we knew were problems we could solve and get done, and we're the comeback state in the United States because of that attitude. So my view is we got a lot more good things to do that we should stay focused on and get it done. Now the challenge is there's a ballot proposal out there that deals with some of these kind of issues. So in some ways, people are trying to provoke the dialogue. I hope we can avoid it, but as a practical matter, it may come up at some point.
As a businessman, what 3 things would you suggest to the city of Port Huron to do to bring businesses back to the downtown area?
Well, the first one is I already said, Vicki did it. She knew how to make a good pitch, a good offer, and try to close a deal. That's number one. Because you got to have people that have that fire, that spirit. The other one is the same question I'd have in Michigan, is about being positive about your community. Because we don't recognize each one of us as an ambassadors for Port Huron and for the state of Michigan. I asked this question earlier to a group of people when I was talking to them. If you go back 2 or 3 years, if you go back to 2008, 2009, think about that. When people used to come into the state of Michigan, you'd have relatives come visit or somebody come in and visit. Usually they'd be pretty excited to come in and visit until they actually talked to one of us. And once we started talking, we'd get them depressed about what was going on. Now, that's backwards, folks. We are the comeback state. Port Huron's got a lot of great opportunity, but it starts by you promoting you and us. Because I like to ask people this, as Michigan comes back, who's going to promote us on the East Coast or the West Coast? Nobody. And that's something we should be proud of, is we're humble Midwesterners, but we tend to be too humble. So I'm not asking you to be arrogant about it or be brass about it, but we got to speak up. We got to be talking about how cool this is. You got a lot of great things going on. You need to be fired up and tell people. So when you get on that airplane or you go visit some other part of the state or somebody else, you're the best marketing. Tell people and smile and have some fun. That's the best thing you can do. The other thing I would ask from communities, though, is don't downsell your Michigan neighbors. And you're not doing that here, but it is a problem we've historically had, is we'll have someone say something good about their area and then they'll badmouth their neighbor. We're all in this together as Michiganders. So let's go for pure Michigan here. It's a great theme. Let's get it done.
I'm concerned that putting emergency managers in Michigan cities like Benton Harbor, Pontiac, and others takes away the democratic representation from these voters. Are you concerned?
I'm always concerned about a situation, but what I would say is, you almost said it on how you said it when it came to emergency managers. There's a crisis. There's an emergency. The community has failed in terms of its financial affairs to get to that status. Sending in an emergency manager is something I never want to do. There's no desire to have an emergency manager anyway. And actually, until we changed the law last year, we wouldn't get an opportunity to work with the community until it got to that point. So one of the best things that people don't realize is Public Act 4, which I do know that Public Act because it comes up enough, is we put in an early warning system to work with communities to avoid financial managers. And then the second thing we did is we put in more powers so that when that emergency manager came, they would be able to do their work better and faster, get done and get out. Because the emergency manager law actually goes back to Governor Blanchard. And it wasn't working very well because we had cities in crisis that were staying in perpetual crisis. That's not a good answer. Isn't the better answer to say, let's put in an early warning system to work with communities to avoid it, where we can do consent agreements or work with them to avoid the problem? Or if it, for some reason, does happen because there is a true failure, with the only other option really being bankruptcy, which is an even uglier situation, isn't it better to have people be able to have the tools to solve the problem?